12s, and welcome to our first lesson. These are video lessons, and I hope that my voice isn't too low for you. Hope you can hear this. And again, whenever I do my lesson, folks, please make sure you come and see me if you need extra help or any clarification. To start off our first unit in the course, we're going to take a review of SOHCAHTOA, or trigonometry review. Just remember, folks, that there are three primary trigonometric ratios. The sine, which is your SIN button on your calculator, cosine, which is COS on your calculator, and the tangent ratio, which is tan on your calculator. Just remember, we use the acronym SOHCAHTOA because it represents the ratios of right triangles based on side lengths. So when we take a look at the sine ratio, that compares the opposite side length to the hypotenuse. And again, it's SO, that's the SO part. The next ratio is cosine, which compares the adjacent side to the hypotenuse side, and that's the ca part. And lastly, we have the tangent ratio, which compares the opposite side to the adjacent side. And again, those are side lengths, so we compare which one's bigger than the other, or a ratio based on each side. All right, and remember, when we're dealing with SOHCAHTOA, we have what's called the opposite side, the adjacent side, and the hypotenuse side. And we measure them in terms of their length. Okay? And the cosine, sine, and tangent are the angles. Okay? These ratios are only used in what's called right-angled triangles. So those are called 90-degree angles. All right, and we use ratios to find side lengths and angles. So again, if you have any two pieces of information for a right triangle, then you can find the third or solve all of the important information in a right triangle. Okay, what's important, ladies and gentlemen, is how we label our sides. Okay? And the confusing part tends to be the opposite or the adjacent side. Let's just quickly remember that wherever you see a 90-degree triangle, you'll see, sorry, 90-degree or right triangle, you'll see the 90-degree box here, which I'm coloring in. Always opposite it is your hypotenuse, or hype for short. Okay? Doesn't matter where your 90-degree triangle is, opposite the 90-degree angle is your hypotenuse. Where it can get confusing is the difference between the opposite and adjacent sides. And that depends on what we call your angle of reference. Okay, so let's say, for example, my angle of reference is from A. So from A, if I go across, I have my opposite side. And beside it, or adjacent to it, is the adjacent side. But what about, ladies and gentlemen, if I change my angle of reference? What if I now have angle B being my angle of reference? Again, I go across it to make my opposite, and then I go beside it to make my adjacent. So again, it depends on your angle of reference, or your reference angle. All right, ladies and gentlemen, in order to compute trigonometry calculations, we need to use our graphing calculator, or a scientific calculator is fine. And remember, when you use your calculator, you got to make sure that it is in degree mode. You should see a D or a DEG on your screen. All right, so just check on your screen in small little letters, D or DEG. If not, double check, and you can take a look at the mode button to change it. Okay? And see me in class if you need help with that. So let's get your calculators out, folks, and do some practice here. And it depends on how your calculator works. If you have a two-screen calculator, or calculator that's about $15 or more, you will press this, for this example A, you will press sine 35 equals. Okay, and if we do this to 4 decimal places, you will get 0.5736. If you happen to have a scientific calculator that isn't a two-screen display, you may need to press 35, then the sine button, to get your answer. Okay, it depends on how your calculator works. All right, let's try example number 2. Example number 2 is cos 24, so press cos and then 24 equals 0.9135. Okay, you're going to say, great, Mrs. R, but what the heck does that mean? Just remember that cos belongs to the ca part of SOHCAHTOA, right? What does that mean? It means that the adjacent side is 0.9 times the length of the hypotenuse. So it's a ratio comparing those two side lengths, the adjacent and the hypotenuse. All right, let's take a look at tan of 70. Tan of 70 equals 2.7475. And again, that's the TOA part. So what does that tell us? That tells us that the opposite side is 2.7475 times the length of the adjacent side. Okay, so just remember, guys, if you need to use your calculator, make sure it's a degree mode, even when you are doing angles. Okay, so again, this is repeated, but make sure that you are in degree mode. I apologize from time to time, folks. I have to do my videos at school, so I have the smart board, so you will hear the odd announcement coming over the PA, and I apologize, but I have no control over that. Okay, so now back to the lesson here. Now we want to find some angles. And just remember, we use theta as to replace an angle, and we're asked to find the angle to the nearest degree. So in this case, you have to do things backwards. In order to find an angle, you have to use your inverse buttons. So it's sine to the -1, or cos to the -1, or tan to the -1. Okay, whenever you're finding an angle, use the inverse buttons. So use inverse when finding angle. Again, that should be a review from grade 10 and 11. Let's practice it. So again, we're given sine equals the sine of theta equals 0.8746. In order to get theta by itself, you're going to say, hey, Mrs. R, I need the sine inverse of this value. So you go second sine, which gives you your sine inverse, then press your value in and equals. Okay, and hopefully when you plug that in, if you say theta to the nearest degree is going to be 61 degrees. Try part B. Okay, again, we have the cosine this time, so theta equals the cos inverse of 0.6157. And plug that in your calculator, and you should get 52 degrees. Okay, third one, tan theta equals 11.45. Again, you're going to take theta equals the tan inverse of 11.45. And you should have theta equaling 85 degrees. Okay. Again, your calculator works one of two ways. If you have the old calculator, you may have to go 0.8746, then go second, then go sine. Okay, if I'm using this example here, depends how your calculator works. All right, let's keep moving on with our review. Getting ready here. Let's take a look at some examples. Determine the length of the indicated side. Notice, first of all, ladies and gentlemen, this is a right triangle. That means we can use SOHCAHTOA. And there's a given angle, so we're going to call that the angle of reference. So from the angle of reference, side X is opposite it, so that's the opposite side. And the other value that has, the other side length that has information is the hypotenuse. It is opposite the 90 degree. Remember, when you have SOHCAHTOA, this is the key that's going to help you decide. Looking at what information we have an O and an H. Which part of SOHCAHTOA has the O and the H in it? It is the sine. So you're going to go sine of the degree of reference, which is 50 degrees, equals, and you got to put in the order, opposite, which is X, which is X over the hypotenuse, which is 18. Okay? When X is on top, we cross multiply, so X equals 18 times sine of 50 degrees. And plug that in your calculator, and you should get X equals 13.8 28. And since there's no units there, just write down units. All right, let's try example B. Again, I look for my angle of reference, and where do I have information on? My x is my adjacent side, and my 25 is my hypotenuse. So again, looking at SOHCAHTOA, in this case, which one has an A and an H in its grouping? It is the cosine. So we're going to go cos of 28 degrees equals, again, go in order, adjacent, which is x, divided by 25. Cross multiply, x equals 25 cos, my fault, gotta erase that, cos of 28 degrees. And when we get our answer here, folks, you should get 22.1 units. All right, just remember, guys, if you had a case, I don't have this as an example, but say you had something like sine 30 degrees equals 10 over x. So say you're asked to find the hypotenuse. Remember, there's a shortcut way. If you have x as a denominator, not a numerator, you switch it with the left side. So it's going to be x equals 10 divided by sine 30 degrees. Okay? And then if you plug that in your calculator, just for example, I'm just going to do that with me. So it's going to be 10 divided by sine 30. That equals 20. So it'd be 20.0 units. All right, so again, if you're finding the value that's on the denominator, do a switch. Replace it with the left side. Okay, and you'll end up dividing. All right, let's take a look at our next lesson. Sorry, our next example, which is finding an angle. Okay, so when you're finding an angle, let it be the angle of reference. So what two sides do I have here, folks? I have the opposite and the adjacent. And again, if you're not sure, keep writing out SOHCAHTOA if you don't know how to get whatever ratio you're going to use. Again, look at SOHCAHTOA. The ratio that has O and A in it is tan. So you're going to go tan theta equals the opposite, which is 15, divided by 28, which is your adjacent. In order to find the angle, you have to take the tan inverse of this fraction. And make sure when you do this in your calculator, folks, that you use the brackets. Okay, and theta equals 28 degrees, because we're going to round it, so it's approximately equal to 28 degrees. All right, let's try the second one. Here is our angle of reference, and again, we have the opposite side and the hypotenuse. So looking at that, ladies and gentlemen, that tells us, if we look at SOHCAHTOA, that's the sine ratio. So sine of theta equals the opposite, which is 80, divided by 92. Okay, to get an angle, you've got to use your inverse buttons. So sine inverse of 80 divided by 92. And you're going to get that theta equals 60 degrees, approximately. Okay, please make sure that you're plugging this in the calculator at the same time. All right? All right, another thing we want to make sure is that there's a couple terms that we need to make sure we're familiar with. And one is the angle of elevation. Okay, and specifically these are used in word problems. So the angle of elevation is the angle formed between the horizontal line and the sight looking up. So in these cases, guys, see the arrow going up from your line of sight. So from the horizon going up. Okay, all right. The other definition, guys, is the angle of depression. Okay, I always get these figured out because if I'm depressed, I'm down, and that's what you need to remember, that this is the angle from the horizon or horizontal line with the sight going down to the object. So if I'm depressed, I'm looking down, I'm down. Okay, so those are two pieces of terminology I want you to make sure you know. And the last part, ladies and gentlemen, sometimes it asks you to solve a triangle. Solve, when it asks you to solve a triangle, that means to find all missing side lengths and angles. Okay, so whatever information is not included in the diagram, you are going to find. Okay, and here's tonight's homework. page 12 and 13, numbers 1ACD, 2AB, and 3AB. Just a reminder not to write in those workbooks because we treat them like textbooks. Have a great day, everybody, and again, come see me in class if you need any help. Have a great day. Bye-bye.